anybody would like to have that prayer, I'm going to walk in the Lord. Okay. Let us pray. Dear Father God, we come together just to another day to do the business of the city. We thank you for the opportunity. We thank you for all the wisdom that will be imparted here today. Let us do all things that will be uplifting this city and not bring disgrace to it. Please, we ask in your Son Jesus' name. Amen. And pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. This is the workshop discussion. There are two items on the agenda. There's public donations and public display of signs, policies. We're going to start with
Let's start with the display and the signs, because that's what's not.
yeah.
It's here to talk on, so
Yeah.
we don't have him sitting.
Okay. When you start talking about public displays, controlling public displays, signage, that obviously brings in the First Amendment and other issues of the law. And there's a recent case that kind of helps start. There's a lot of different analysis we need to do depending on the type of regulation that you're doing. And it depends on, what some people don't realize, it depends on is it government speech or private speech. And there was a 2022 case, and I'm going to read different parts of it that I highlighted from the U.S. Supreme Court that talks a lot about this. And this is kind of like the first step to say, okay, what can we do and not do? And this dealt with the city of Boston. The city of Boston had 3 sign poles, flagpoles. One flagpole was for the American flag, one flagpole was for the state Massachusetts flag. Third flagpole, city of Boston flag, but they allowed others to replace the Boston flag for certain ceremonies over time. So what this said is, Boston has for years allowed groups to hold ceremonies on the plaza during which participants may hoist a flag of their choosing on the third pole in place of the city flag. Between 2005 and 2017, Boston approved raising about 50 unique flags for 284 such ceremonies. Most of these flags were other countries, but some were associated with groups or causes such as Pride Flag, a banner honoring emergency medical service workers, and others. In 2017, plaintiff, the director of an organization called Camp Constitution, asked to open an event on the plaza to celebrate the civic and social contributions of the Christian community. As part of that ceremony, he wished to raise what he described as the Christian flag. The commissioner of Boston's property management department worried that flying a religious flag at City Hall could violate the Establishment Clause and found no past instance of the city having raised such a flag. He therefore told the plaintiff that the group could hold an event on the plaza but could not raise their flag during it, so he sued. And the court said, Supreme Court took jurisdiction, certiorari jurisdiction, to decide whether the flags Boston allows others to fly express government speech, and whether Boston could, consistent with the Free Speech Clause, deny petitioners flag-raising requests. So I'm going to read to you different parts out of the opinion that helps, I think, summarize what the court said. The Free Speech Clause does not prevent the government from declining to express a view. The government must be able to decide what to say and what not to say when it states an opinion, speaks for the community, formulates policies, and implements programs. In those situations, the court conducts a holistic inquiry to determine whether the government intends to speak for itself, or rather, to regulate private expression. The court's cases have looked at several types of evidence to guide the analysis, including the history of the expression at issue, the public's likely perception as to who, i.e. the government or private person, is speaking, the extent to which the government has actively shaped or controlled the expression. The court has held that messages of permanent monuments in public parks constitute government speech, even when those monuments were privately funded and donated. The court has found that license plate designs proposed by private groups also amounted to government speech because, among other reasons, the state that issued the plates maintain direct control of the message conveyed by actively reviewing designs and rejecting over a dozen proposals. The most salient feature in this case is that Boston neither actively controlled these flag raisings nor shaped the message the flags sent. To be sure, Boston maintained control over the event's date and time to avoid conflicts, and maintained control over the plaza's physical premises, presumably to avoid chaos. But the key issue is whether Boston shaped or controlled the flag's content and meaning. Such evidence would tend to show that Boston intended to convey the flag's messages as its own. And on that issue, Boston record is thin. Boston says that all, or at least most, of the 50 unique flags it approved reflected particular city-endorsed values or causes, but the court did not accept that. Indeed, the city's practice was to approve flag raisings without exception, that is, until petitioner's request. At the time, Boston had no written policies or clear internal guidance about what flag groups could fly and what those flags would communicate. Boston's lack of meaningful involvement in the selection of flags and the crafting of their messages lead the court to classify the third-party flag raisings as private, not government speech. Because the flag raising program did not express government speech, Boston's refusal to let petitioners fly their flag violated the free speech clause of the First Amendment. When the government does not speak for itself, it may not exclude private speech based on religious viewpoints. Doing so constitutes impermissible viewpoint discrimination. In light of the court's government's speech holding, Boston's refusal to allow petitioners to raise their flag because of its religious viewpoint violated the First Amendment. That's a 2022 case. What that court is basically saying is the First Amendment regulates the government's ability to regulate private speech. That analysis doesn't apply to government speech. But for it to be government speech, we need to have policies and procedures in place as to what we will and won't allow. We have to control the message. Whereas if we let anybody put a flag up without much guidance or controls or rules or regulations, most likely it's going to be private speech. Now, when you get into private speech, and this is where most people hear this, because like when we want to regulate signage, that's First Amendment communication, obviously. Panhandling actually falls under First Amendment speech. Adult entertainment establishments. The law does not allow local governments to regulate the content. We can't regulate of a third-party speech. We can regulate time, place, and manner. So we can talk about when you're going to speak, the time, the place, where you're going to speak, and the manner, how you speak, but we can't regulate what you say. And there was a recent case, I think 2015, where the Supreme Court said, if you have to read the message, you will get, and that will tell you, to see what regulation it is, that it is a content-based regulation. So, I think if we're going to, if we don't adopt policies, the best way to say it is, we do not adopt policies regulating our control over what flags are spoken. The prayer we just had. A lot of jurisdictions just stand up and say a moment of silence for that very reason. If we're going to say a Christian prayer, somebody, and the mayor said, anybody else want to do a prayer? If a Muslim want to do a Muslim prayer, we can't say no. We've allowed prayer. We can't pick one, because even under government speech, the courts have said you still have to conform to the establishment clause. You cannot promote a particular religion. So, if anybody ever came in here to say, hey, I want to say a prayer, I was always prepared to say, hey, we have a list, put your name on your list, and you'll be in the rotation. Because we have to allow anybody to, once we say we're going to do prayers, we have to allow anybody to come in and do a prayer. We can't pick and choose which prayers are going to be allowed. Now, there's some other cases that come into play where, you could ask a question, because there's a question I have. Well, how do we give the Christmas off? It's a religious holiday. How do we pick that day to get off, or Easter to get off? And there was also a case where someone challenged a large cross, 35-foot cross that was in a town.
National Park.
It was a national park. It was in Arizona.
It was a national park.
Was it? And the courts have said there are some things that have, like with that cross, yes, a cross could have religious meanings, but also in that particular situation, it's a non-religious meaning because the cross symbolized fallen soldiers. And it was put up to symbolize soldiers from 1918, soldiers that had not returned. So even though, yes, the cross does in some instances would have a religious message, in that particular situation it did not. It said the same thing about Christmas. Christmas has a commercial holiday message. It isn't strictly about, the birth of Jesus and that kind of, Now, what you typically see is if we put out litigation has occurred where Christmas decorations, if you only put the manger setting out, you're going to have an issue. If you combine the manger setting with all the other Christmas decorations, Christmas tree, Santa Claus, Rudolph, all that kind of presents, then it's more of the commercial nature of it, and it's not the courts have upheld that. They've upheld the holidays and being challenged. These are all cases on the Supreme Court. Having manger settings, the nativity scene, those things have been upheld as long as it's part of the Christmas message and not isolated alone. So this area of law, I'll say this area of law is probably the most confusing and difficult area to deal with, to advise on, to comply with, because I read you some of the things they look at, like issues regarding how does what's the history of the expression at issue? Is the public likely perception as to who's given the speech, government or the person? The extent to which the government has actively shaped or controlled the expression. Those are very subjective determinations. It's not an objective standard. It's really easy to adhere to. So that's why, my advice typically is on these type of issues, be very careful opening the door. Because once you open the door, I don't know where it is. It's not opening the door is okay. Once you open the door, it gets, for instance, I don't think we have any regulations over what flag is flying. I don't know how that gets chosen. I've never seen regulations or rules. Based on that, I would say if anybody wants to come here and fly a flag, we got to let it fly. Now, if we have
unwritten policy only.
yeah.
Federal, state, and city flags are all on, because we only have a single flag.
Yeah, and then so what I would suggest is, we can always expand or amend the policy, because I would like to do more research to say, okay, what exact policies have the court looked at and upheld? But what I would start with is a policy saying, look, on our flagpoles, what you just said, there's unwritten policy, let's make it written. And say, we are only going to allow those flags on that policy. We're controlling it. So now we're saying that's government's, our position, that's government speech. We're not opening it up to the public and regulating what they can do. It's government speech. We are only allowing these types of flags to be flown. We probably need to say, I would say on the prayer, if we're going to have a prayer, we just have a written policy. If somebody would like to do a prayer, they got to come in and sign up to do a prayer. I would probably say no killing of animals. There may be some reasonable things we can put in there, but other than that, we need to allow anybody who wants to do a prayer to do it. Or we go to a moment of silence. We can do that. If we have a prayer, then which is fine, we just have to have kind of a registry. Other people can sign up for it and they can do a prayer. And this kind of goes into the donation policy. As it relates to donation policy, we have volunteer forms, we have donation agreement, we've had many citizens donate significant property contributions. I think we've had somebody build a pavilion for us, I think at one time, in one of our parks. I think what's important about that, and probably what we've got to have as a written policy, this is what we do, is the commission has to accept that donation. The commission has to accept the conditions of that donation. And there may be obligations associated with that donation the city has to do. So those things all have to be approved by you. And once that, somebody gives money, then that money needs to be accounted for separately. It doesn't have to be in its own separate checking account, but in our ledgers, our books, it needs to be said, this is reserved for this purpose, whatever the purpose the donator gives to it. But I think it would be good to at least adopt a policy on flags, donations, and prayer. Would be good to put that in writing. And there are cases in here that I read, and you probably heard about them, where people have challenged the Ten Commandments, for instance. That sometimes gets challenged as, is that contained in violation of the Establishment Clause? And there's the one case I was reading from, not the one with the flag, but a different one. It upheld having a Ten Commandments as a permanent monument in the park. So, that could happen, you can do those things. But we just need to look at what those rules are, what those regulations are, to make sure what we're doing is not opening the door. It's one of those areas where you open the door, it's a slippery slope. And it's really hard to say where that's going to end up. And so, typically, it's better never to open the door. Just keep the door shut. You don't get into those type of issues, and you don't have to worry about unintended consequences. But I think there was
one city that was challenged on their display of the Ten Commandments, but it was in.
There's one in Alabama, the courthouse.
It included the multiple different ones because they had a Magna Carta, a copy of the Ten Commandments, and I forget what else, but it was showing the levels of law.
Yeah.
So that it was allowed to stay because of that.
Yeah. This one is Pleasant Grove City, Utah, a 2009 opinion from the U.S. Supreme Court. And there was a permanent Ten Commandments monument in a park. And they ultimately upheld it. A lot of the same thing where the question was, is it government speech or is it private speech? Because if it's government speech, the whole analysis about content-based and not content-based regulation doesn't apply. Other regulations apply, but not the content-based. And understand, when we get into content-based regulation, sign codes is the one we deal with mostly. We can't regulate what that sign says. We can regulate, if we have a content-based regulation, which means you have to read the sign to determine what the regulation is on that for it. It's content-based. It's presumed unconstitutional. Comes in presumption unconstitutional, and we have the highest scrutiny to overcome that. And there's a lot of things that come under First Amendment speech, which might surprise you. Panhandling. That is one that comes under First Amendment speech. That is protected. City of Daytona Beach. They went through a very lengthy process to establish a panhandling regulation. I remember a few years ago, and it was just stricken by the federal court. It's up on appeal. And they went through a couple days of evidence presenting and testimony to try to show how bad the situation was. And I think they did it to try to be able to say that even if it's content-based, it should be valid because of what we've shown as testimony. But they haven't, they lost the federal court, and so it's on appeal to the 11th Circuit right now. So I know we have one individual, last meeting, not the workshop, but the meeting, said that he was approached in a park for panhandling. It'd be nice to do something. It's very, very hard. Because when you also get into First Amendment, there are things something referred to as, we have heard as traditional public forums, non-traditional public forums. Your traditional public forums are those areas where historically the public has been able to gather and express themselves. Streets, sidewalks, parks, those are your traditional public forums. So it's harder to regulate those areas. Your non-traditional public forums are different. Because, you know, for instance, police department, just because the city owns a piece of property doesn't mean everybody can go into it. Everybody just can't walk into a police department. That's not a public forum. But if you have a city park, you have a sidewalk, you put the streets, those are areas where people typically are allowed to protest and gather and, you know, express themselves. But it, you know, like I said, it goes to what we deal mostly with is sign code. And what sometimes you deal with is you say, some of the cases I've seen is where you have one regulation for a temporary commercial sign and a different regulation for a temporary political sign. Temporary commercial can be up more in a year during a 12-month period than the temporary political sign. I've seen that being strict. You know, it's because you got to look at you got to look at the wording. So it's a temporary political sign, you can only do it for 30 days. If it's a temporary commercial sign, you can do it for 90 days. It's a different regulation based on the content of the message. So the ideal thing to do with signage is you give some, you know, whether it's residential or commercial, however you break it out, you get so much signage, it doesn't matter what your message is. You know, you get so much signage. And then it's not content-based, it's content neutral. You get, you know, if you have this size commercial building, this is the maximum signage you can have, period. Now, you want to advertise a political person, fine, go ahead, but you're not going to advertise a business. But you get this much signage. What I wanted to do, I proposed for the cities I represented, and I don't know how to do it, for regulating panhandling, is I wanted, because where the panhandling Daytona tried to regulate was around intersections. That's where the panhandling was occurring. And I said I wanted to create, because this is the problem I see with Daytona's regulations, a lot of them. It's okay if I go next to a car and hold a sign that says, vote for me, as a politician. But if I hold the same size sign, saying the exact same place and say, feed me, you're going to prohibit it. That's the problem I saw with the regulation. And so I would say, within such a certain distance of major intersections, there's nobody doing any messaging. No campaigning, no solicitation of funds, no nothing in those areas. I call them the solicitation-free zones. But I said you've got to be willing to go over there and arrest politicians who are campaigning at those intersections. You've got to enforce it. Well, they're with the whole regulation. So, but that's how, I mean, when you strictly apply this stuff, it gets tough. It gets really, really tough. So,
Let me ask you, Scott, two real specifics. On numerous occasions, I get calls and emails. In fact, I turned one down today that a local organization was asking to advertise on our website a program. And I've always taken the position that it's not government related, if it's not a city, county, state, or federal link that takes you to FEMA information or hurricane preparation, we don't do it. That's what the Chamber of Commerce or whatever is for. So if you're advertising, I don't care if it's a kid's program. So my answer was no, we won't link that to our city webpage. I've also been asked about putting messages on the sign, and I say the only messages that can go on there are messages advertising meetings, city events, and things of that nature. So if we're talking policy, I'd want to kind of make sure as a board that they're in agreement. And the other, I want to use, because I think Nancy's here. Nancy, I mean, this is probably part of the discussion you might at least
I
want to
didn't hear
do.
what you were saying.
No, I want to bring up an issue that was around signage, which I know was a conflict we had around the Easter time, and it was the crosses for Christ and the signage. And I'd said no signs because I've always been from the school of don't open the door. So, no.
The door had already been opened, though, right?
I'm not arguing with you, I was using that as an example on why this meeting kind of came about in the discussion to try to get some resolution. But then an issue came up, and I'm gonna tell you, I was very challenged. You know, a few months later, then we had Troy Day signs appear throughout the community, and one went on city property. And so I asked about it, and I was told, historically, the commission passed a proclamation declaring May 4th Mr. Troy Day, and that signs were placed on pieces of property that he actually did work or construction or did some service. So that sign, as much as it was difficult for me, I didn't tell them to pick it up because there had been historical use of it designating places where he had touched the community. Now, they did ask for his name to be put on a marquee, and I said, I can't do that. So I kind of want some help too in clarifying in the sense of what should or shouldn't, because
I have some questions too on the follow-up.
Yeah, well, okay, let's talk about the Troy sign. I think that's pretty clearly a private speech. And, for us to say it's okay to do Troy Day, but not Jim Day, or something like that, you start opening to your regulated content. The better way to do that is they put it on private property. And then, that falls under, we have a content based neutral, say, look, if we declare a day, then we're gonna allow, private property for so many days, that may be a better way to handle that. On the private property, I assume they were putting it on right away.
no, it was on private property,
Okay.
but this building was one of the buildings that he had done his footprint or hand, not footprint, his thumbprint or whatever was on, so they put it there to
So
recognize.
you get, anytime you open a door for anything, the question is, okay, what have you opened the door for? And how do you only open the door for what you want and not open the door for things you don't want? That's the difference.
And it did, it bothered me because I wanted it picked up to be consistent, because that's the way that we had dealt with Miss Weary in terms of there. And so I knew this issue was, our workshop was coming up, and so it was somehow out of that.
I think if we're going to get into any of those issues, then we need to say, okay, how do we convert those to government speech? We obviously have to control the message and everything like that, and has that been allowed to bring us some additional court cases?
Doesn't the Troy Day one become government speech since we adopted that day to honor him and what he's done for the town?
Well, we've adopted, there's
I know, we
all
got
kinds of
American Legion Day and.
but if you go, I think every day, 365 days is somebody's day. I'm pretty convinced of that. Every time I turn around, it's they're saying, oh, this is so-and-so day. Not just like telling us nationwide, everybody's got a day or a month or whatever.
Multiple one day.
I need some clarity on that too, because of the Troy Day, I have phone calls. I don't know who Troy is, but there's a sign on city property. And of course, we went through the debacle of the process of Christ. Explain to me, if I'm correct on this, the process for the prize was done by a private sponsorship. People were sponsoring the process to go on their private property, not
Yeah,
city property.
There was someone
They were on
that
city
sponsored
property.
them, put on city property.
Well, then, the people should have put it there, because when I went around and looked at it, it was all on private property. So someone did not know the difference from city to
Well, in
private.
the past,
That was the
people have
past.
sponsored for city property.
Okay. Well,
Well, my understanding of it is that the all the crosses were here, the city hall property. And that's when the previous administrator contacted me, I said, well, look, at a minimum, comparing it to what have been held in Christmas themes, you gotta do other things, you just can't have crosses. That would clearly be a violation of the law. Put up, Easter Bunny, Easter eggs. Now, I will say, I'm not familiar with any jurisdiction that decorates for Easter. Now, they will do Easter egg hunts, I've seen those type of things. The more commercial side of Easter, I've never, I'm not saying none do, I personally have never seen a city
Gillen does across also,
on their property, or?
all throughout the city. I don't know if it's on city, but it's all throughout the city.
Yeah, you could do it on private property, that would be a different issue. That would just be
And it's
similar to Christmas decorations and things like that. We could allow those types of things. People decorate for Thanksgiving, 4th of July. They can put things on their property. I'm focused on
And that's what Gillen did.
what about their property, the city's property.
So then, if we're looking strictly at putting a cross in city hall property
Mhm.
at Easter
Mhm.
or at Christmas, let's say, decorate the cross for Christmas. I guess I'm getting kind of confused with, we have an angel out there, which represents Christianity. And you said yourself, the cross doesn't necessarily just represent Christianity.
Because it's been used in other words.
It's been used in other ways. So where do we start? I mean, it sounds like
You
we're
gotta
getting more
combine two.
political than
Let me
we
put it
are.
this way, if this city just put up a nativity scene, or if this city just put up an angel, I would say you're in violation of the law.
Because we only had an angel.
Yeah, you can't do that.
last year.
Can't do that. Now, if you put Christmas trees,
Well, no, but I'm talking about for the Christian piece of it. There was an angel,
Well, you
beautiful angel.
you can have an angel, and you can have a nativity scene, but you need to
Let's
have,
take that together.
well, you need to have Santa Claus, you need to have reindeer, you need to have
Yeah.
all that stuff, and that makes it less religious and more Christmas, commercial Christmas. If you just put an angel in the nativity scene, you're gonna have, that's an issue. If you combine them with other decorations related to Christmas, tree, Rudolph, all that stuff, courts have said that's okay.
Well, and you've explained that to us in the past, and I think that's pretty obvious, I mean, with kids, Easter bunnies or whatever, a whole mix of things. We also talked about it. Some satanic group came in and they wanted to put something we obviously would not be able to tell them no.
That's the question, when you start opening the door up to allowing people to celebrate, decorate for holidays on government property, where do you say no?
Well, I would,
Since
there are
I-
two things I just kind of want to throw in, and then maybe we can get into your discussion about it, because I know that you probably want to, we were talking about the flags, or you were talking about the flags. We have 3 flags out here. I know there's a congressman, in DC right now, he's from the north, and he has 3 flags right outside of his office door. One is the American flag, one is his state flag, and one represents his Christian, for whatever religion he is. And of course, there's been this, all these people coming in demanding that he takes them down. He's not taking them down, and he's not being forced to take them down. So,
I would ignore that.
that's.
I would honestly, I would ignore that, because I read you the U.S. Supreme Court decision on flags. That case I read through you all, that is a flag case. And so if you are going to allow, the city's got to adopt a policy and control the message the flags go out there. Or if you don't, anybody can put anything. So that's, it's like an all or nothing proposition. So, if we're gonna say it's just the US flag, the Florida flag, and the city flag, fine. I think we
Which I
adopt that
think
policy.
is all that we,
Yeah,
is
that's fine.
necessary.
But once we allow
Because
someone to
it-
fly some other flag,
religions.
if we allow some other flag to be flown, we open the door. It's
Yeah,
or,
I get that.
that's the issue. So, I don't know how the congressman's doing it. Maybe where he's flying the flags, they decided we're not gonna regulate it, he can fly whatever flag they want.
Right outside
Might
his
be
office
for
door.
his freedom of speech part.
Yeah.
Well, if they don't, if it's not designated as government speech, they can't control what he said. They can say, you're allowed 3 flags. Now, if he wants to fly those 3 or any other 3, if you say, no, this content is not acceptable, that is now a content-based regulation.
Well, and also, in the prayer,
Mhm.
so, and I get that too. I understand.
That's been in the U.S. Supreme Court.
stood up tonight, and at the end of the prayer, he said, we ask all things in Jesus' name. Well, if we have someone signing up to come in and pray, and they're satanic, at the end of the prayer, they can say, we ask all things in Satan's name. And we have to allow it.
Yeah, because Satan in the middle of religion.
Yeah. So, well, what I'm saying is, I mean, we're gonna have to dig deep, I think.
And I can get you, there's some cities, Oak Hill, they do moment of silence. I think that's why a lot of, some jurisdictions have just gone to a moment of silence, so everybody can pray in their own way. Not saying we have to do that, just want everybody to be aware, when we just can't say, hey, Christian prayers only. Can't do that.
I did, I wanted to mention two things. Number one, when we did the process here for Process for Christ, we did incorporate the commercial aspects. It wasn't until last year when Ms. Bishop complained that they were removed. Even after Lee had no problem with it. So there's that aspect. She had participated for 2 years prior, all of a sudden she doesn't like me, she complains, and they're no longer allowed. Number two, the signs were removed immediately upon a complaint from Mr. Preston. My signs were immediately removed, and yet other signs were allowed to stay throughout the city, even in rights of way, for up to, I want to say, a week. And, I mean, you can't really fairly pick and choose who you say no to, and that is what has happened here. Somebody doesn't
I agree
like
with that.
somebody,
I agree with that, everybody
Well-
wants to be treated the same.
and they do, and I haven't been. Process for Christ was very welcome, everybody had a great time, and then all of a sudden somebody doesn't like it. So we're just gonna use our position to make things ugly, and that's what's happened, and it's not right.
And I think that's why we probably need to make sure that we have a good solid policy and procedures.
And I will tell you this, there are no shortage of non-for-profit organizations that would love to sue a city over First Amendment issues. You say, well, people are gonna go pay the money to hire an attorney, they don't have to. They'll line up to sue the city to make a case.
Just ask the Urban Council.
Yeah, exactly. ACLU, everybody. You know, you start messing with the church, you're gonna get all kinds of church organizations. You don't have to worry about the church, whether that church has any money. There are plenty of organizations, not-for-profits, that will step up to represent.
Isn't there an attorney, I think his name is Benjamin or William or something, that's going around the state? And
Could be
just going through cities, just looking for stuff to sue them for, and
They-
opening all sorts of lawsuits against cities.
Well, totally unrelated, that's what they do for, DEA violations.
Just to relate to what you said earlier about the prayers, legislative prayers, why are they constitutional? The Supreme Court has presently constituted, as it is presently constituted, appears to have effectively foreclosed any constitutional challenges to religious prayers, even when pervasive, sectarian, in content, at legislative meetings, absent blatant displays of proselytizing or coercion, as long as the legislature employs a facility inclusive method of selecting from within the geographic borders.
There you go. That last part.
That's that last part.
That last part says, hey, you can do all this stuff, as long as you include it.
As long as it's inclusive.
There's
So-
inclusion.
That's what I said.
Yeah. And that's why I think we can say, look, there's gonna be no butchering of animals. You know, we're not gonna do any, sacrifices here.
Yeah.
I think there's some things like that we can say, but absent that, we just gotta be careful.
On a perfect day, when we have meetings, to be able to have different church pastors come in and have a legislative prayer, and that way you have the Methodists, you have the Baptists, you have the Church of God in Christ in this community, I'm not asking for us to bring anybody else in, but at least to have the opportunity, so that we can, our meetings have a legislative prayer on the agenda, so,
And I think if you possibly, it might be enough, just I will say, definitely, maybe it's enough to put it on our website. If anybody would like to do legislative prayer, please contact the city manager. We can say, look, we opened it up, no one's called. You know? But I think we ought to have, I think written policies, like you said, on all these issues would be a good guidance. Verbal policies, historical practice is subject to memory lapses, things deviate a little bit, we just need to have it right, that's all.
I think a lot of the emphasis in being political, doing political signage, doing elections, primaries, when you have multiple signages going out, and it becomes an eyesore. Our police department picks up the signs, and if they're in the wrong place, and they'll drop them over here at City Hall or even at the Public Works. But that's almost a cyclical thing, because like in the last election, there was only, I think we were probably the only, maybe 2 cities were having an election. So you didn't see signs. But when you have a general election, you have primaries, you've got 4 or 5 people in the same office, it becomes a bedlam of signs.
Especially in city, county,
City,
state,
county, state.
federal.
And then that also gets to the point of how many signs can you have in your yard? And how do we distinguish between a sign for can you have 1 sign per office? Can you have 3 signs in your yard? If you have a corner, do you have a right to put a sign on both sides? So it can be a little bit expansive, but with regards to the signage, the supervisor of elections, they also have a policy that for when you're making campaigning, they'll tell you where you should not put signs in right of ways.
They trump the city actually.
One of the things that I found out that
I don't know that the supervisor of election has any regulatory authority over that. They may, I've never heard of it.
well, there was
County right away, county, they control that.
the county has a right of way issue because we used to have signs up on as you come out of I-4 going east or west. There would be signs you should come around if you're going west, and you come around, you're facing signs, and there were signs that were there, and that has been almost like a tradition, but then they kept being removed. So when I contacted who was in charge, they pretty much told me that they changed the rule, because when you come to that stop, you should be looking at traffic and not looking at signs. So the signs that were there that had been traditionally been put there, they were all removed. And that's on both sides. As a matter of fact, on the eastbound side coming off of I-4, there was a sign that had been there for years. It was a real estate sign. And I had put a sign right next to it, and they came and took my sign. When I inquired, they said they didn't want anything there. And I asked, well, what about the real estate sign? They came and got it. So
Because it was content, they only put the political sign that allowed a commercial sign, that's a content-based restriction.
right. So that kind of if the county is regulating that, that's
The state regulates that no signs can be put on the interstate either.
right. Sure.
And honestly, you could make a valid argument that every single sign code in the state of Florida has violations.
Okay.
Because there's just the practical side of it, there's certain things that you have to read the content to understand what the regulation, what are we talking about? What regulation applies? And it's very hard to have a content-free regulation say, this is all you can have. For sale signs. So somebody has a for sale, so you have a temporary political sign. This is one I always struggle with. You have a temporary political sign. You can only have that up so many days before an election and got it down so many days after election. So it's a maximum number of days. For sale sign. It's up for as long as that property, so if it takes 2 years to sell that property, a for sale sign can be there the whole time. I mean, how do you get around that? How can you tell and really try to address.
Kelly?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about the ordinance. You were in office when we did this ordinance on the signs. It says 3 temporary signs. So there's no guess right now on how many can be out there. It's 3 temporary signs per property. On number 5, ordinance 2020-09, under 4.10.09 temporary signs. Number 5 says no single sign except during construction as described in number 7 below. Okay, let me skip past that. Talks about shall exceed 6 square feet in sign area, and a total of 3 temporary signs are permitted. This is not based on content, and we went into deep dive into this. I'm sure you remember this. This was a deep conversation that lasted quite a while that night, and it was 3 signs per property. So, and in here, and I was actually quite surprised, on the change in number 3, when it talks about no permanent temporary sign shall be located closer than, and 5 feet from is stricken, and it says the front of property line or public right of way 10 feet adjacent property lines, and in no instance shall any temporary sign obstruct. And this is the part that I think that 5 feet was necessary. We discussed that. Shall any temporary sign obstruct the visibility of any motorist, bicyclist, or pedestrian from seeing oncoming pedestrians, cyclists, or vehicular traffic? And that's why that 5 feet was implemented. So it had to be further enough away from the property line in order for a clear view of oncoming or anybody who could get hit by a vehicle. But we went into detail in this, and I'm just surprised on why this is being brought up with the stricken of 5 feet.
Can I say something?
That was in
I think
2020-09 that the 5 feet was removed.
But I think what,
So where's the, I'm sorry, where's the one that was adopted with the 5 feet stricken?
That, it doesn't say what the date is. I'm guessing it'd be, well, it's during July 2020 when they started talking about it. And it looks like 2017 or 2018 was when 41008 was adopted with the 5 feet. But that was removed because there's, in some people's front yards, they have maybe a couple feet, and then they got a hedgerow, and if they put the sign 5 feet, it's gonna be behind the hedgerow, nobody's gonna see it.
Well, if that was the case, and that was stricken and changed in 2020, why is which is what we implemented, was 3 signs, 3 temporary signs per household. Why is that not changed and stricken there? Because I think this is something after we agreed to it, was stricken.
but this is on the placement of the signs, right?
That's on placement, but the ordinance was placed in here.
That was to control the number of signs because, like was discussed from that time, the number of political offices running.
I
They
understand.
wanted to limit the number of signs, so they added the limit of 3.
I remember, I recall, because I was on the dais at that time, and there was a situation where one resident had 6 signs. And many people had an issue with that. So we had to come up with a number that was fair. There was discussion at that meeting on how long can signs stay out? Can we limit the content? No, we can't limit the content, that's freedom of speech. So we implied a policy of 3 that time, but this, on number 3, the 5 feet from the front of the property, I would like to see where that sign with 5 feet from the property has been stricken and the front of property was included into this ordinance. Because I don't recall that, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't recall that being something that was agreed upon unless it was agreed upon after November, or on November 2021 till now. I don't recall that being brought up to be changed.
I believe it was.
Scott?
I was just worried about public property. Wasn't here to regulate private property. So if we're opening that, then we have probably a much longer work session because you're gonna have to review your sign ordinance. I was just worried about what we displayed on public property.
Well, I went out to the statute and Scott's right, of what can be said, basically it's what, when and where. Sort of like a.
Time for some-
That's it, you know. But placing a sign someplace else is something we're gonna have to, we know it can't go to city hall. But
I think
in terms, the length of times, what we can put up on private property, such as toy signs and, you know,
What individuals can put up on private property.
exactly.
I think our sign ordinance is fine because it says that it cannot be put on city right of way without the administrator or his designee's approval. So it covered it, it's got to be on private property, it cannot be on public property or public right of way. So I think the sign ordinance covers everything, and it limits the number of signs, so you don't have 20 signs on a 100-foot piece of property, you can only have 3.
I know I talked to them too during that period of time, and there was a lot of discussion that she was, we talked a lot about, and she emphasized, I don't want to regulate content. That's why you see 3 signs on residential, you see 3 signs on commercial. It doesn't matter what the content is, you get the number of signs is based on the residential, commercial, I don't care what you're saying on. So, there was a lot of discussion about it.
You're saying you don't care what's being said on there?
Well, there's,
You know,
you can't have profanity.
No, you can't have
somebody
obscene stuff.
painted on there and stuff
yeah,
like
you can't do
that.
that, but I'm just saying, she says you have about 3 temporary signs. Okay, get 3 temporary signs.
Well, that kind of bothers me because we've got 5 people maybe running 5 different offices. Now, where I live, we can sign up
That's private.
nowhere, you know, not even on a screen porch, you can't be seen. So, and I kind of have a problem with that, but, you know, I can't fight that. I'm not fighting City Hall right now, so.
Yeah, I can not go through our sign code for suggestions for some nice.
See, I can put up 6 signs, 2 property signs.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that, to me, the most important thing that we need to work on first is what's gonna be allowed, such as the Troy signs. I don't know, we may come up with a Jim Gleason Day sometime, I don't know. But the crosses, as long as they're on private property and private sponsorship, I think that's a.
I would put those under holiday decorations. You know, the holiday decorations are allowed, because they're talking about something going on in Easter.
Well, but let's say, you know, I lost 2 brothers in just a matter of months, and I want to put a cross up in recognition of them. Holiday, you know, I think if we're gonna have to start categorizing by days, that may get real difficult.
You need to get a piece of property like I have, because I've got a process that's been up for 2 or 3 years.
I'm getting a motorhome and I'm getting.
It's in the middle of my field,
Yeah, a cross may not offend anybody, but what if somebody wants to put a swastika up there?
But now you're regulating private property.
Huh?
Now you're regulating displays
Right,
on
that's what I'm saying,
private property. You can't do that.
we cannot say a cross is okay, but a swastika is not. We can say nothing is allowed.
One house can have a Confederate flag and the next door neighbor might be offended by it, but that's still
That's still
valid.
okay, and I'm saying it's okay, but if we say we're gonna allow crosses, all right, what if somebody wants an upside down cross? What are we gonna do? Somebody wants to.
That's not an opinion. It's-
But it is, but we can't say no to it, I'm just saying,
But
once you
I'm
say
you're
it's
saying
wrong,
you can't say no to what located on private
I'm saying
property as long as it's not
if
seen.
you're allowed to put up a cross, I was saying we could put allow crosses during Easter,
Mhm.
as a holiday decoration.
On city property, is that what you're referring to?
No, private property. You know, just say people are allowed to decorate. And you had said, what if I want to put the cross up at other times of the year?
What if I want my cross up 365
Fine, but
days
what
a year?
if your neighbor wants a swastika up 265, they can have it.
But that's freedom of speech.
All, I'm just saying it opens the door. If you allow crosses 365, you gotta allow swastikas 365. But we can say neither, but we can't say one or the other.
But we can't regulate
We can't regulate
the,
private
we can't
property.
regulate
Look, we
the,
can regulate private property, of course we can.
On having displays?
Sure.
we can regulate what the.
What world?
Time, we can do time, place, and manner.
If there's if the ordinance, if we pass an ordinance that, what we have here is a temporary sign. Is there a temporary sign? Is there anything in this wording here that you would
I
have?
haven't even read it. I didn't even know what we were gonna talk about.
Okay,
To be honest with you.
Go to the.
right. So I guess that's where
The city's.
we came in here with this is 3 years ago, 4 years ago actually. That was my last year of school, as a matter of fact.
I was focused on researching First Amendment, Establishment Clause, some U.S. Supreme Court cases, and not delving specifically into our sign code regulation.
Right, I think that was where we were thinking to come at. Commissioners, any
It's on my freedom.
more?
But that's what we're talking
It's
about.
my freedom, my freedom.
Heather,
That's what we're
Heather,
talking
please.
about, that's what.
It would be considered an accessory structure.
Mr. Rutland, please.
Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure that I understand, because whether we like the crosses or not is not the point. Whether we like the swastikas is not the point. And so what I'm understanding though is that if it belongs to the city, like the angel belongs to the city, and we display it with other commercial pieces, it's permissible. So say.
It's not an establishment clause, in my
Okay.
understanding.
So,
You're talking about singing a Christmas tree, things like that.
right,
Across
so,
and
for
bunny
example,
rabbits and eggs.
if I may, if, for example, the crosses that have come before us, one of the reasons that it has maybe, this is bad terminology, but become a problem is because it's private citizens purchasing or renting or however that process works and putting it on property that belongs to the city. But if the city purchased a cross and displayed it with
Wouldn't matter.
Easter bunnies and et cetera, then it would be permissible? I'm trying to.
But I think what the
distinguish
city,
difference.
what the city does not have right now
Mhm.
is a written policy on what we're gonna celebrate. We don't have a policy on that. So I think we have to have a written policy to say,
On what we celebrate?
this is now government speech.
Okay,
We gotta make it government speech so it's not content-based restriction.
so
So-
whether we own it or it's
It
provided
can be,
to
it
us.
can be donated, it doesn't matter.
Does not matter, because what I was hearing you say, and I'm glad that I asked, is that if the government was doing it, that it would be permissible as long as it's not just religious belief.
If the government manages the message.
I see.
That was a part of their case. It said the government has to control the message. They said, in this case, it was government property, their flagpole, in the Boston case, but they just let anybody fly any flag they wanted, and then somebody wanted to fly a Christian flag, they said no.
Okay.
And they said, no, that's not government speech, that's private speech, we can't do that. So you have to adopt regulations controlling the message. And then we can decide but you still have to comply with the establishment clause by saying, we can't just put the cross in, we gotta put other things in there to make it an Easter. Now, none of the cases talk about Easter, they talk about Christmas, they talk about Thanksgiving, none of them talk about Easter. So I haven't seen any case addressing the Easter question. But I used the Christmas case as an analogy to say, if we include all that with the cross, the bunny, the eggs, and it's a whole big display, then possibly the court would say, that's just the commercial stuff, there's a secular purpose, there's not non-religious purpose to this display, it's just not promoting Christianity. But there's no case on it. There's cases on Christmas. So I'm using that as a guide. Because a lot of jurisdictions don't put up Easter, put up Christmas displays.
Right, but I was more so, trying to expand this conversation just some of the things that we already know about. What about breast cancer awareness month and, you know, the Pride Month, there's, Black History Month, there's a lot of wonderful things that are happening out in the world, but to specifically limit it to those, you know, where do we draw the line, I guess, is what you're saying, we need to draw that line and make it very clear.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you draw the line at the government flags, I think that's pretty standard. Once you go beyond that, it gets into a slippery slope, that's all.
Question. In the news, we've seen someone flying the flag upside down.
Mhm.
That is free speech.
Mhm.
And that is something that we can regulate. Nothing to regulate.
Well,
That's
yeah, we can, okay, so
Right.
what we can regulate is time, place, and manner. Upside down, no, but we could regulate, we could say, flags can only be so big. You can't have flagpoles. I mean, there's all kind of there's time, place, and manner regulations that we can put in place. And those are just subject to less scrutiny, it's not automatically guaranteed legal. But we can regulate time, place, and manner. What? The fact that you flew it upside down? No, that's content.
That's what I'm getting at, is that because this individual might feel that's a reason to do it, another individual who might have a completely different perspective, but they want to use the same expression. So one can do it,
Right.
then the other can do it.
And-
Is there anything
Nope.
Well, from an administrative standpoint,
you need?
it's easier to say no and not open the door. But you set the policy, I'm just telling you that's an easy one to administer, because we tell people no. We don't put anything, we don't promote anything other than the government message on government property.
I think that's kind of sad because I live in a lot of cities and a lot of states, and I've seen government buildings, not just city hall, they're all decorated, the kids go out, but they have, it's not just one thing, they have something for everybody, and people love to, you
But
know.
we've got a governor who's just signed a law that says you can't do that anymore, because he doesn't want rainbow bridges, because he only wants red, white, and blue from certain times. So what I'm getting at is it's almost like even from the state level, we're starting to be getting in and picking and choosing one group over another. And it's like government shouldn't do that. We should stay out of that. And governor may not be friendly to the LGBT community, but to sign a state law saying that bridges can't have rainbow colors under them,
And it has.
yeah, he signed it, yeah. He was bragging about that just the other.
We're living in different times now.
Yeah, this is getting crazy, it's gotten more political.
Is there anything else from Scott? Kelly?
Yeah, I just want some clarification. So is this body going to look at doing policy to regulate what private property owners have on their property as far as flags, crosses? Is that where we're at?
No,
I
but-
think so.
No,
I
it's
don't
not.
know where you got that from.
Yeah.
That's not what that's what this was about. This was a
Well, I
workshop.
asked what the discussion was, and.
Well, that was a discussion, but there's not no direction on that, but I'm saying, the question is, can we regulate structures that go on property? Of course we can. We regulate the house, this city regulates the color, the frame, we do all kinds of aesthetic regulations. And so, we can regulate time, place, and manner. So we can, the manner is how are you going, what are we gonna allow there? You put up, are they accessory structures? Are they gonna be regulated accessory? We regulate accessory structures all the time.
Well, so if it's a permanent, let's say it's a permanent sign.
It's still an accessory structure.
That goes up to, it has to be, dimensions have to be accurate, but that doesn't mean the content.
We don't regulate, we're not gonna regulate content, no.
Okay, thank you.
Just structure, not the content. Yes.
I just like it on record that I think it's fine if you guys wanna regulate, but you have to treat everybody the same. If you regulate me
100% agree.
in what I do, you need to regulate every single other person, and that has not been done, was not done, and still is not done.
Yeah, I would endorse Nancy's last one.
Thank you.
Because I totally agree with it. Yeah, we gotta treat everybody the same, 100%.
Thank you. Mr. Administrator, what, has that given you anything to work with, or is
say it here, and I don't mean that in a rude way. I mean, you have to make clear, because again, my concerns had nothing to do with private property. That wasn't the issue. The issue was city property. And so you're either opening the door, and if you open the door, then as Nancy says, that door is open to everybody. Or we say no, city property is only for city messages. That can be July 4th, that can be Market in the Park. Those are your events, those are city messages. But not for advertising somebody else, some idea, or promoting a holiday, whoever it is, meaning that's something you do in your yard. That's what you do at your house. You fly a rainbow flag, you fly a Christian flag, whatever you want. That's your business, but not us.
What have we done in government buildings that you weren't in before? Let's say a mascot.
Well, depends, as Scott would say, a lot of things are done across the country. It doesn't necessarily mean they're right. It's just
No. but
either
I'm
they
just-
haven't been challenged or in terms of their. I'll give you an example on prayer. When I got to Littleton, New Hampshire, they didn't do prayer. One of the elected officials felt strongly and got prayer brought in. She went out of office in March. The first thing they did was undo the prayer and go back to a moment of silence. I'm not a Christian. I have no use for religion. And so you all pray. I'm okay with that. But I don't stand. I don't participate. But that's okay. I feel uncomfortable, but you have the right to pray at a meeting.
Well, I don't feel uncomfortable because you don't play or stand up. You can sit on.
No, I know other people will or do. And what we noticed up there was in the beginning, everybody did. And then as it went on, half the room sat down. And finally people realized, I don't want to participate. But it's like the pledge to some degree. We all stand because we're kind of told to. I have a tough time with the pledge because it says under God. That was not part of the original pledge. That was added in the 50s. So it happens everywhere. The city of Orlando puts up pride flags and celebrates June. You go to another area and they're not allowed. In fact, and I'm not picking on DeSantis trying to get political, but his view is that, to be honest, that should be eliminated. But he hasn't had any control over what the city of Orlando does, at least today.
Because I like rainbow bridges for my dogs.
Probably if you wanna go with a
Crazy.
display ordinance and everything, probably start with our policy on what holidays we recognize and build from there.
Well, you can go to our policy book and look at all the days off that people take off for holidays. There's a list of.
Well,
But we are unique in the sense of Easter. This is the only place I have ever worked that it was ever off for Good Friday and Good Monday. I'm not saying right or wrong, but
No, but you're right.
But-
Years ago.
yeah, my wife's a school teacher and she never had been off for Good
Now,
Friday.
used to
now
years
because
ago.
the federal government recognized the Monday after Easter as a holiday because employees weren't working on Easter. So they recognized Monday to give that day for the employees to have off.
Well,
That's
it's
why
like
it was
Thanksgiving.
added to ours.
I've never seen people get 2 days off or 3 days off for Thanksgiving. That's just beyond my.
I've always had two, so I'll say that, yeah.
People,
I just
they
got
take a
something
half
on
a day,
Christmas,
the day
being off, being
before
closed for a
Thanksgiving.
week for Christmas.
Yeah,
Can we,
that's good.
can we bring this back to the next item? We can discuss this all day. And that's the one thing that I do appreciate about being able to have this open discussion. But this is a workshop. We have two things. There's not anything that we're going to do that's going to change the signage right now. Well, that would be up to the commission. I mean, the commission, however you feel that we are, I mean, as an individual and as a group, and then we do, you know, we're a collective group. And, how do you feel that there is something that has not been met in this particular workshop? Is there things more that you want to add to it?
Yeah, I really would like to add to it. I thought when we were gonna talk about signage, I get now that it was, I missed that part, I guess, with getting the games or whatever, but that it was just about city property. I thought it was signage throughout the city itself, not just city property. So I was gonna bring to the table tonight, Kentley, as an example, we, you know, remove the signs out in front of the that.
Yeah, if anything's in the right of way,
Right, so.
nothing's permitted in the right of way.
Had all that moved back, that these are people who, they're tucked back away, you know, most people don't know it's back there. And they're willing to rent city property, do something to get signage on, which would be a way of revenue. There certainly there would have to be parameters on that, but they would be willing every month or every year or whatever to pay like a business if you put a billboard up on a building or something. So I thought we might talk about those kinds of issues in signage.
I think those are addressed somewhere in the ordinance, but not particularly underneath the sign ordinance.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything.
The question that I had mentioned to Jim earlier, this is not going off the signs, but it actually is talking about signs. When they were negotiating for the auto mall, and there were the billboards that were going up. Do you know whose property the billboards sit on? Is that city property? Because I've been, you know, it's like there was a big discussion about billboards, and actually, I think when Hurley was trying to entice the city, he might have threw a couple of bones out there, especially with the electronic billboard. So I haven't addressed it, I haven't been there, I mean, Roger was there, maybe.
And the construction billboards were on the Hurley property. The interstate signs that you see up there, the big ones, those are leased from property owners, like the cell towers, they pay them a fee to handle the spot for the cell tower. The sign people pay the owner of the property a fee to have the sign on that part of their property. But no, they're not supposed to be put on public right of way, they have to be on the construction site property.
So even like the question that I remember came up, there was some opposition about the cell tower because someone said that it would be an eyesore. And I brought up the question is you know, between Interstate 116, 118, 2 miles, it was Buddy, that's Buddy. So do you know how many billboards there are? Yeah, no, I think there was like 18. So I said, well, if you can erase a billboard, the cell tower, you would not even think about it. So that question was always on my mind, who was the recipient of the cell tower? Being it was early, because he needed to have that exposure. So that transition to property, whoever get the property taxes or value on that.
When you talk about cell tower, you go down 295, and you're going through all the businesses, buildings and everything out there, and there's one big metal pine tree out there at the cell phone tower.
It looks like it's done.
It's the only
We're not
one in that area.
Well, let us just move this along, because we can get deep in the woods here. The donations,
Well, where that came was during your process, I think it was my first meeting or second meeting, and there was a request, and you gave $3,000 for the pantry. And so I think out of that discussion and talking with Heather, I thought maybe it might occur more at budget time, but it was on the list of discussions. was, you know, should a city be giving money, tax dollars away to other entities? And it kind of goes back to the same issue of city property. I mean, this is my opinion. You guys set the policy, so let's make sure that we're okay on that. I'm not telling anybody what you should or shouldn't do, but for my role, we have the legal ability to tax somebody. And if they don't pay their taxes, we can take their property. So when they're giving their money to us, it's not voluntary. It's a legal requirement. So we're expected to use that money to pay for police, parks, your roadways, you know, your infrastructure, and provide public services. And so there's that debate on, then does a elected body take those tax dollars that aren't voluntarily given because they're required to be paid, and then turn around and pick and choose different groups to give it to, when there's a lot of good people out there. And so that's kind of the philosophical that you have to start with first. Do you have a belief that it's the government's role to take tax dollars from the private sector and then turn around and give them to another entity? And if that's the case, then you develop a policy so you have a criteria on how to do that.
That's one of the issues, I believe, is that we don't have a set written policy. We've got past practice on donating money to organizations that are going to benefit the citizens of Lake Helen.
Is that?
Oh,
And
what I was gonna say, Roger, the mayor handed this to me.
yeah, that looks, yeah, I got.
And, yeah, I'm gonna have to find out where it is.
It looks like somebody's working on something, cutting and pasting from Orange Cities and D-Lands and creating that one, so it looks like a work in progress.
Okay, so, yeah, 'cause I don't know if it was ever adopted, but it's not in my.
It's not in none of the city's current policies.
The only thing that we had about donations, and it evolved from organizations and individuals coming asking the city for money. And it's not only did they come to ask for money, they asked to be able to have access to our park without a fee. Melissa Park was one in particular, which was the Henry White's organization, who would come annually to ask for the ability to use the park without having to pay anything for it. And it would come before the commission, and year by year they would agree to it. And then it came to the commissioners wanted to come up with a list of people that we organizations, Pastor James, and the churches. So that's kind of how we got onto that, because there was a repeated request. And so the commission, which I've sat on, the commissions came up with an amount. And that amount, whatever it was, $8,000, I think by the time when Jim got here, there was $3,000 left in that particular line item, and the commission decided to give it all to the church. But that brings us back to where we are again. Do we have a line item or a budget for that type of thing? And if I'm putting the horse back of the cart, should we even have a policy? And if we shouldn't have a policy, then we don't really need to have a budget for it. But as we come up with a budget, when you create a line item for something like that, somebody's going to ask for it. What this was, it was just a template of at least some structures, something more than we had. I haven't seen anything that was basically in terms of definition, sponsorships, the contributions of monetary or in-kind support. In-kind support would, if you wanted to be able to use the building without having you were on that list, that you can get it. Acknowledge the city and the city's contributions, grants to the cities. So this was just, so you've already read this about project. So this is the only thing I had to go on, and this is what I found up in my office. This was the Cameron's stack of stuff. I got a lot of stuff on this Cameron's stack. But this was there's a page 2 missing, and that's it's my fault because I did see it before, that I don't know where it was. But this is the closest thing I can get to in terms of donations. What type of a policy would you be interested in?
But back on my train of thought when I was talking about it, we've got, whether it's unwritten or written, I haven't been able to find a policy on receiving funds that people donate to the city for different things and stuff. And it always goes into the general fund. And then when the person comes back to the city and says, you know, well, where is it? And they says, well, we don't have a record of it. And I think that's one of the big issues is that in the past, there's people who have donated to the city's lost track of it, and it's gone to the wayside, but put in the general fund, and all of a sudden the thing's coming back, you know, they want to know what happened to it. That leaves the city open to be sued by anybody that donates money to the city for a certain item, and that item does not get taken care of. They can sue the city for, misuse of the money. And then the courts will stand up. But that seems to be an issue, and we need to have a line item, and it's gotta be tagged so that to identify when people donate money to the city, that it's marked as a donation from who for what, and then make sure that that money goes towards that purpose. I mean, mine in particular, it took, 3 or 4 years to get park benches. And the city sat on that money for that amount of time. At one time, they had lost the paperwork for it. I had to dig it out of my paperwork and give them copies.
But you were getting money to the city, not the city.
Or benches.
Right.
Well, that's a donation policy. That's part of it, the donation.
I have
And then, the other one is that, yeah, we've been donating a lot of money to different organizations that help the citizens of the city, but we need to add to it a limit so that it can be spread out to more people that do things for the city rather than just 1 or 2 groups.
Finish.
Yeah.
My opinion is that we should not be giving any donations to any 501c3s, to any religious organizations. I've gone back, I've done a lot of research. As far back as with David Bottic, who happened to be a congressman 3 terms. He kind of got caught up into a donation debate with a constituent. And the whole idea is, and what he ended up having to prove to Congress was that it's against the Constitution. That really, there's nothing constitutional about us giving donations. So I took some of his words, not everything, but I want to start off with the risk of government, charity, and nonprofits, if I don't know, these rates. Our reliance on government as a funding source carries risk. For one, government dollars often come with strings attached. Government grants have been found to significantly increase inefficiency and bureaucratic expense in nonprofits, and this was a Harvard research. And there's a reason for that. Typically, when a 501c3 goes out and they do their fundraising and, you know, they're nonprofit, they don't pay taxes. But then they come to the city and ask for money from taxpayers who are paying taxes. It's unfair because they're not paying taxes. We're giving So there's a reason for that particular piece of it. But, Dave Parker, while he was in Congress, he reminded our elected leaders that, the elected leaders, that once all government involvement in charity was not just as worrisome, but downright unconstitutional. And what had happened, just to put the story behind it, was there was an officer's wife that had fought back during the war. He died, but he didn't die in battle. And many people died, many women were widows, lost a lot of men. And there was no monies offered to those people, but they just chose this one moment. And so, constituent kind of got into it with Congressman Crockett. He said during that time, after the Alamo, a bill came before Congress to appropriate monies for this widow of a distinguished naval officer. When he got up to speak, people assumed that he was in favor of it. Instead, he reminded the legislators that Congress didn't have the constitutional power to appropriate charity, as he said. And that's, we did not have the appropriate right to do that. We have the right as individuals to give away as much money as we want. I can give to whomever I want to. You know, if I want to give to Wounded Warriors, if I want to give to a church, I tithe, whatever. That's my money. It's, nobody's paying taxes on the money that I pay my taxes on. So we do have the right to do that with our own money. And that's charitable. But we do not, as members of any government body, really have the right to appropriate $1 of the public money. He also said he was the first man on the floor, so he offered this to all the congressmen. I will give 1 week of my salary to this widow. You all give 1 week of your salary to this widow, and she will end up with more money than what you are offering for $20,000. Well, he proved his point. The bill went up in flames. Not one government official offered a penny to that widow. I thought that was really interesting. So that bill died real quick. And then the question came up, don't we wish our legislators now had such sense now? And Crockett, it's not our money to get. We're paying taxes. And if we're giving donations to food pantries or to churches or to any organization, non-profit organizations who are not paying taxes, but the people who are paying the taxes are paying taxes to a non-profit organization who gets to put the money in the coffers. That's kind of unfair to the taxpayers. Additionally, if there's a food pantry, that's a 501c3. They're in, regardless. It's whether it be one of our leagues, one of our boards, whatever. It all boils down, they're not paying taxes. But the sad part is the food that we think that we're giving to these needy people, they're paying taxes on it. So it's really not free to them. They've already paid taxes, so it's not free. So we're just giving everybody else's money away as well. So, in my opinion, I mean, that may not be popular, but I don't think that it's ours to give. And if I go 1C3s have not had to be accountable for any monies that the city gives or anybody donates or fundraisers or anything else.
They're supposed to give a report to the city within 6 months after receiving the funds, but I don't think anybody ever
I've
has.
never seen one. So
Neither have I.
there's no accountability.
But do it for a couple of years, and they quit for a couple of years, and it comes back for a couple of years. That's why we need to have a donation policy, so that we're not donating the citizens' tax money to it, but we're donating the money that the cities donated, that the citizens donated to the city for certain purposes.
But why can't
So,
five
if
oh one
we-
C threes do that?
They do go out and get funds from the citizens
But I mean, they
also,
you're right.
but a lot of the citizens of the 501c3, or actually it's a 501c1 through 21, goes to a citizen and asks for money. Usually a lot of times the citizen won't do it. But if there's a central organization that divvies out money to the different organizations that request it, that's what our donation policy would be used for. So if somebody comes in and says, look, my wife passed away, I inherited all this stuff and everything, I want to give $5,000 to the city to use for whatever the city feels an organization needs. That money would go into a donation policy line item, and if somebody comes in and says, like outside the gate or Massey James Center says, we could use $1,000 to be able to help us get through for a little while. That was where the money would come from instead of out of city's coffers.
Well, and that I agree with. And in fact, I think back when Kelly was in office or sometime during that, she came up with a program called WIP, where people could come in, I guess during COVID or whatever. Do you want to speak on that?
Yeah,
We're not using tax dollars. We're using our
WIP
own
is a
money.
housing program also.
But we're talking about donations and, excuse me, Doug. We're talking about donations, and one of the things that we do have a policy on donations. It was written back in 2007. And the donations that Mr. Rogers was speaking to, which has gotten away, is that if somebody wants to donate something to the city, we have a policy. It's the policy of the city of Lake Helen that all gifts to the city be processed through the city administrator's office. It is the responsibility of the city administrator to notify the city commission of all potential gifts to the city. That's on page 1. It's only a 2-page
So
deal.
I
The procedure is written to support the donations to the city policy P29. It is purpose to define the process to be followed for presenting, receiving, approving, disapproving, and tracking of donations to the city. We're not tracking the donations that's coming to the city. And that's one of the points that Roger, and I remember there were some things that money had been set aside for a specific reason, and then when whoever donated it found out that the reason that they had donated it, it wasn't being done in that particular vein, we didn't have the policy or they didn't know what it was. But, and this is like I said, I found this again, my folks upstairs. This is the City of Lake Helen policies and procedures that was signed in by Mayor Mark Shuttleworth in 2007. So it may be in some instances that we go back to the future and figure out what we did, when we did it, because there's so many things that have occurred and changed and we as a board, we're not permanent commissions here. There's turnover in the city commission, and every time we get new commissioners, they either have to start from scratch, like I did, like everybody else did. And some of this stuff, we do not have it at fingertips. It's in papers upstairs in that office upstairs. So we probably got the policies and the answers to those questions, but finding them, and that's one of the reasons that people ask why I'm in the city hall so much. The reason I'm in the city hall so much is because over the 15 years that I've been collecting papers, my office, I can't get in my own office at So what I started doing was bringing these papers here. They're upstairs now, so the next commissioner or mayor that comes into this office, they have a continuity of paperwork. This is what I'm finding these things, and I'm finding things that I had no idea were up there. But you know, and we'll keep writing a new policy about something that we may already have a policy on.
But are we talking about two different things? I mean, if Roger's talking about, and you're talking about citizens coming in and giving money.
What I'm talking about is similar to what he's talking about.
Exactly.
It's part of the donations, that's part of the donation. A donation is two things. A donation is someone giving the city something, there has to be a policy for that. A donation can be the city giving somebody else something. That's both donations. You don't distinguish the two. The fact that we do have a policy, and I'll be more than happy to go over this and make copies of it for you, because Roger hit the nail on the head, because I can remember there was an issue where somebody was very distinctly wanted to know why is that there was whatever they had given, and it had gotten so far from when it was given that people forgot about it. So here we are now.
Yeah, what I'm talking about is us having a line item where the city sets up in the budget taxpayer dollars. I thought that was where we were headed. Am I wrong? Not personal donations.
So we have a policy that was actually doing that, setting aside money for donations or whatever people will come to. I think it was $8,000.
But that means.
When we get into the budget problem,
What you're
we
saying-
can remove that.
What you're saying is it should stop, but that's what was put into place.
Exactly.
And we haven't modified it, we haven't changed it. I think the fact that when Jim came here, one of the first things that he had to watch us do was to give away $3,000. Even though we could be considered a worthy cause, it was in our budget to do it, and they did it, the commission, we voted on it. So if we want to remove that now, or we want to expand that, I think that's where it's to this commission to make that kind of decision.
We can remove that during the budget process.
In the budget process.
Not put the money in.
Yeah, but it's the one, like I said, we can all come in here and donate to the city and say, yeah, I want this to go to the cemetery for something, or I want it to go to a widow. But do you mind if this is sort of on the same lines that Kelly had, where people make private, it's a private donation to the city.
There's been people that's made, I made a private donation to the city.
You and I
There's
did.
been other people that's made private donations to the city,
You
and
and
when
I
they
did.
come to get the city to pay for what the money was donated for, the city says,
So
well,
that's
where are we
a
getting the
kind of-
money from to pay them?
Yeah, that's.
The money I gave you, you know.
This is where you Mr. Rich Basso that would sit on the commission and we have an issue about something, he just go write a check. That was a benefit that we had with Rick Basso.
Not Rick Bass.
Yeah, I mean, none of us are Rick Basso.
But, I mean, you and I gave, you know, to a young kid. So-
Kelly has a hand up. I think, is there anyone else that'd like to speak? Because,
And Todd wants a cake donation.
please, he's on the list. He's on the list. Todd, you're on the list. I'm sorry, Kelly. He's on the list. He's on the list.
What list?
The list that you signed with says it in the card.
Didn't know there was a list.
Yeah, it's up here. Yes, Todd.
Okay, well, she's signing this. I just had a couple of things, let's see. Donations, one way to resolve people giving donations is to, if you're creating a policy or updating it, you could possibly have them sign a waiver or disclaimer saying that we'll try to correct your donation here, but we can't guarantee it. What I would say, perhaps you can come up with a disclaimer or a waiver when somebody makes a donation, you know, because they might donate it, we could have a catastrophe tomorrow, and the city commission decides, oh my God, we gotta save everybody's life, we're gonna use the money for this, I'm sorry, you know, so some sort of waiver or disclaimer might be beneficial if you can come up with one. And then, number two, Mr. Gleason's way, and I track of not wanting to spend taxpayers' money on donations to others. And not to counter that, but I just wanted to point out, I think you pointed out also, that not all the city's revenue comes from property taxpayers. There's other portions of it, so the way you were talking about designating funds to go into the donation fund, if people donate, then you could donate to other people, because it's not taxpayer money, so. I wouldn't necessarily, just rule it out completely. And then, perhaps a policy could include encumbering taxpayer funds to only be used for providing public services. So you could solidify that by saying, any revenue that we take in that comes from the taxpayers, the property taxpayers, that will only go to providing public services. So when you do your budget, you spend it all on public services. If there's nothing else in there, then there won't be any donations. So if you're doing a policy or updating it, maybe you could consider that. Encumbering the taxpayer funds if it's not already done by law anyways. But other funding could be earmarked or unencumbered, like your donation fund is unencumbered. We can choose, we'll set a policy and we'll donate that to whoever meets the requirements of that policy. That's all I have.
Well, just to respond to that, we do have a policy on that. It says that the donation can be, if the donation can be accepted with certain changes or with some more information being required, the city administrator shall prepare the appropriate letter to apply to the donor. So basically what you're saying is the donations were set for a specific thing, and the issues may have changed in some way, that the city administrator could let the individual know, or the family or whomever, that if the donation has changed, and then again, it gets it back to the city administrator. City administrator is the one that, if this is our policy and our procedure, he's the expert on that. The city administrator is the expert on our policies and procedures, and every administrator that we hire after him will have to get up to speed with our policies and our procedures. So that's the continuum. We as commissioners, we come in, we gotta learn from scratch from day one what happened yesterday. The professional, and I give them the credit for that, the professional, I don't know how he does it. That was the question I had. How do you transition from New Hampshire to Lake Helen with the policies and procedures, but he's always in the books. So it's stuff like this that's sitting upstairs in the deck in the office that basically says there, we got a policy and procedure. Somebody, give credit to the previous commissioners. They made decisions that have kept the city where it is. So we should not, I don't discount them to say that, because the paperwork is not in front of me, that it didn't happen. So, yes, Kelsey.
Okay, do you have copies? Okay. So when I was in office, I can't remember, I think I started it in late 2020 and brought it to the commission in 2021. There was a program that I meticulously worked on with the EVIT and with advice of Scott. And so you'll find this paper here, and it's called Lake Helen WIP, which is Lake Helen Water Hardship Initiative Program. So this program would be where individuals, when paying their water bill, if they can come in and make that donation, they can choose to make a donation, either a one-time or a continuous donation on every water bill, to go into a fund to assist residents that receive our water, so that's Lake Helen and Casadega. You can always move that around if you just want it Lake Helen. But those who are receiving our water, one time a year, after they can fill out an application to receive assistance in their water billing. So when at the time during COVID, we were, everybody had a hard time with this. That was just an ongoing thing. So I had written here, over here on the side, you can see, it says, how does WIP work? On the last two sentences there, I had put in where the city can match the funds that are donated up to $10,000. Now that can easily be removed. We're in different times, we're talking about different situations right now, but it's creating a line item that we can assist our water customers. And this is based on donations that the city would receive for this program. I think it's very beneficial. I mean, even the unearned, not the tax, tax dollars, we have donations that come in from the events, we have donations that come in, people just come in and give money. That money can be used to match those funds. I mean, right now, historically, we've been donations for $8,000, and they have been very well received. But what I'm offering here with this program, I'm trying to suggest to this commission, is an opportunity to show our water customers, I'll say that instead of residents, water customers, that we are here to help them, and that their neighbors can help them. I mean, what's an extra $1 or $2 if you can afford it? Every quarter. Some can afford something, some can't. Some don't want to do that, that's fine. It's not a requirement, but it's an opportunity for this fund to grow, to assist somebody in a hardship situation. So,
But we would not be using
you
tax dollars.
you could use donations that are brought into the city to help cover a match, or you could just not match it altogether. I mean, there's flexibility in this program, but I think the idea of the program itself to assist our water customers with, when they have a hardship, would really help out and go a long way in showing our residents and our customers that, hey, we understand that sometimes you left the hose on and you're on a fixed income. We get it. Well, this is what we can do this quarter. So,
Thank you.
I'll send in a digital copy to you, Jen, in regards to it.
Yeah, I mean,
It's one of many donation programs that the city can adopt and have on that list for people to donate.
but the question I'm gonna ask you is the concept is there. I mean, there's been other places you can round up your power bill and whatever, and uses it. It's gonna come down to is who makes the decision of what's a qualifying event. So again, if you're asking me that there's X amount of dollars, and you've got 1,400 customers, and it's only so much money to help, who makes that decision on what is a qualifying hardship and who qualifies?
Well, that's what it's like. Are you asking me?
I'm just saying, no.
Okay.
If I recall correctly, when she brought this up, it was also, I think there was a representative from the, what's Volusia Group that helps the homeless people over there?
Neighborhood
The
center.
neighborhood center
Yeah,
is.
the neighborhood
limited
center was
funds.
gonna have somebody that would review the request and designate by their standards which one would receive the assistance.
No, that wasn't accurate, but what was we found out with the neighborhood center, that the neighborhood center is given a certain amount of money, a lot of money to help residents in Volusia County. But this is focused on residents here in Lake Helen and those customers that receive our water. What you can do to restrict that, which is one of the things in here, it can only be allowed once a year. And it's based on the funding and first come, first serve. So that's where that judgment can come in. Can always be played with, you can look at other models, I know other cities do it. But we did take time to put this together. This is a flyer, an example of a flyer that could have been distributed to residents. And those who come in and say, hey, we have this problem. Around the same time, there was a resident that just moved into the villa, who his first bill was, I think it was like $6,000. It was $6,000, and he moved in with this bill being $6,000. It ended up being, I think, a leak or something, but the city of Lake Helen ultimately, without this policy, was able to assist him because he did pay that back. And there was, wasn't he?
No, you're talking about Alan.
Yeah, they
He
didn't
was
pay it
charged
back.
$6,000. He came before the dais when you guys were up there. He did not get the refund. Then when, because the city didn't give it to him. So I talked to Lee prior to me going on the dais, when I found out from Alan, because he wanted to talk to me before you vote, which didn't make any difference at that time. So I came up and talked to Mr. Abbott. Lee called Sharon Hall, but for 2 years they held that
For 2 years, yeah.
$6,000 in the account.
Yeah. But what it was is three water bill cycles. We were to see what his regular charges
Through
for
all
water
of that,
was.
and still, it took 2
Yeah.
years.
It took 2 years.
I want to talk about this program just a little bit too, because I think that it would be very presumptuous of anybody determining who should or who should not get the monies for the water bill. I would prefer to see it cleaned up a little bit, or let's say, I know I've got neighbors where I live, they need help. I could come in and say, okay, I wanna pay this person's water bill this month, or I wanna add $10 to help them each month, with a specific name or something like that, because I think that we would be setting ourselves up to say, well, let the city decide who they're going to help. Because everybody's gonna be coming out of the woodworks going, I need help. I may come out of the woodworks and go, I need help, but I think it needs to be tightened up a little bit,
Well,
think
that's why I'm presenting it to this commission to
I think it's a great
look at the
idea.
concept and see what we can do.
Just to tighten it up, the policy is already in existence.
But
The
don't
policy with regards to anything that would be in the form of a donation to the city administrator, according to this policy. Now, if we change the policy, that's another thing, but we already have it in stone. Now, water has been one of the biggest problems that the city, as a commission, has had to deal with people coming in, having left town, came back over after the summer, and they got a tremendous water bill because they didn't know that they had a leak. They would come to the city commission, and we'd have to turn them down every time.
Because the city.
We would have to turn them down because there was our contract, or that loan that we had basically read in a sense, the city cannot give away water. And giving away water means that if you have a leak and you didn't take care of it when you came before the city, we could not do anything about it. What we did do was to at least come up with a policy to help a person to pay it by installments. The question that I asked Ricky, and I think we're someplace close to that, maybe you know how close we are to paying off that loan, because once we pay the loan off, then it's in our ballpark. Whenever you get, free money is not free. We got a loan to build the well. Along with the well, it came with commitments. And the commitments were, you must pay this money back, but you cannot give away the water. And we were pretty much tied to that.
I think that giveaway the water thing comes from DEP. I don't think that's from the loan.
Well, we were regulated by someone other than the city commission. We did not have the
So
authority.
I don't think if we pay off the loan, I don't think it's. We got to check DEP.
And right behind that, you have an $800,000 loan coming up on water meters, and then you're gonna have
Is that the
an
same
$8
person?
billion loan involving infrastructure, so
And it would just pay
Well,
$52,000.
In terms of
water is an enterprise fund. It is a business completely separate from the general fund. And so you can't take from one ratepayer and give money to another. I mean, you can't do that. It's a commodity. We can't turn around and say, we'll just wipe out your 6,000 gallons. That,
Well,
you can't
And
do
the
that.
state just got
the point,
on some legislation making it even harder to transfer the money.
and that is what comes with having years of set on that commission where people came to us with that exact problem. That exact problem that they said we could not do anything about it. And that was, there was nowhere in our purview that we could make some change in that. But because of that conversation that kept coming up, it was always, the question is, well, when do we get out of this? When we pay this off, can we do this? How far are we from paying it off? That was part of the discussion. Whether or not it is the same loan, with a different loan, with the same components to it, I don't know. But believe me, it was one of the things that was most heartbreaking for the commission when you just tell a person, there's nothing we can do about it.
Well, I think we are talking about, first of all, I think it was a bill that had been sent by the state, but then did not get the money back. It didn't have anything with
I understand.
water or stuff like that. But could I possibly get a copy of what you?
Sure, it's only 2 pages. I got the whole book here upstairs, and that happened to be a policy that, it just happened to be in part of this conversation.
Yeah.
And I just turned to it as we're speaking, because I didn't read it before I came down here.
An example of a donation that the city did turn down. The Moyers family, I think it was her daughter, they wanted to build a pavilion at Lake Park, and they donated stock to the city to pay for the pavilion. And we had to turn it down because of the requirement of the stock. It said that they had to cash the stock in and donate the money to pay for the pavilion. But that's what they ended up doing, and it ended up being more than what they thought, and it paid for what's down there at Blake Park. After a couple of issues with the construction.
Yeah, I remember that. Yes, Nancy.
I just wanted to clarify, when Jim started the conversation on the donations, he just said $3,000 for the pantry. I just want to clarify, it was not the little pantry that received any funds.
No, it wasn't that.
No, it was
Well,
church.
yeah, I just don't want anybody
It was
hearing
outside the
any
gate.
recordings.
It was the church.
Yes,
No,
I
it
know,
wasn't.
I just want to clarify.
Thank you. Tim, where are we at right now? Where are you?
Next time somebody mentions the word workshop, before we schedule it, I'm gonna ask you, what's the intent? What is it we're trying to accomplish? And what is the goal? Because I came in and there were all these items and people said workshops, and I kind of feel to some degree, we've had these meetings, but we really haven't accomplished
I agree.
anything.
I think.
The closest one is that we do have an RFP on City Hall involving the mold. You know, that will be going out, so I'm a little frustrated in the sense that, and we've got a couple more meetings coming up, and I know that, so I mean this in all honesty, you know, if we go forward, if it's something we can't discuss at the meeting on Thursday where you can make a vote, usually that's because you want somebody to educate you on a process or something. And so I guess I was a little taken back that there was like this list of items, so I kind of really thought the council had chewed these around a bit and kind of were gonna help give some direction or some.
I think if we start with our donation policy and review it and see if anything needs to be expanded or updated.
Yeah, because what you can do with that, Roger, and I mean, and you know, because you can set that. I'll give you an example of, it was something that I had seen done, and it was done in Littleton. When funds were donated, it was put on an agenda, and it was brought in, and you as the commission voted to accept those funds, and at the same time, you authorized how they could be spent. So it was very specific on that donation, so it didn't end up in the general fund. And so, I mean, so just a couple of line items to the donation policy could get to what you're getting at, where somebody says, I gave you $500 for the park. We're accepting Mrs. Smith's $500 donation, and in accepting it, we're allocating it, or we're authorizing it to be spent on X, Y, Z.
With the policy and procedure, then no matter what someone's idea of what donation is being given to the city for, it would have to comply with our policies and procedures. They don't always know the policies and procedures. That is where we're supposed to make those decisions. We have a policy and procedure. It might need to be tweaked a little bit, but not all gifts, no matter how well intended, shall be automatically accepted by the city. Because there might be some strings attached to it that we don't really know. It's already here. So it's only 2 pages, so I'll give it to
I
you.
agree with Roger, I think that we should be able to look at it.
Yeah.
Well, we
The only,
need to-
I'm sorry, Roger, the only other thing that is added to this is that it also is inclusive of a finance manager, which we have at the time. So that would be the only thing that we have to modify to alleviate him as being part of the process.
And the other half of the donation policy with us donating money, the city donating money to things, that can be taken care of when we do the budget this year.
Yeah, that's what he said.
We got policies and procedures for almost everything, we just don't implement it.
There you go. There you go.
That's the biggest problem.
Yes, you got that right.
We got a good city administrator now.
That's right. We don't follow the rules and regulations.
So are we getting a consensus of this so that we can bring this back at the meeting? Because I feel like I'm ready to talk about this in a meeting and
Yeah.
make a decision. But I don't know how y'all are feeling, and I would like to see us move forward.
I'd just like to add these 2 pages to that discussion, since we do have, which it's really insightful of the commission to think about, to have thought about incoming donations. We're looking right now, looking outward. They have a policy that if a donation came in, here is the policy to how we be able to administer it. But all the other where's therefores, and that was the line of group was that city attorney.
When they had when they were doing the playground at Lake Park, they had a donation thing that people could donate funds to pay for trash cans, the metal lace trash cans that
Bricks,
was
too.
fit inside.
Yeah, bricks.
I don't know if it included the bricks. They could donate picnic tables, they could donate benches, they could donate pavilions for the picnic tables, and there's all sorts of things that we're not doing.
Can I make a suggestion
Yes,
for
ma'am.
our next workshop? I think that workshop on sidewalks needs to be canceled in light of that email that came out today. I don't see why we need to hold that.
And you're probably right. The question that we probably need to ask is circle back as a commission, is you have a sidewalk policy, but you let a person get up and public comment, and you waive them building the sidewalk.
Right,
So,
that's right.
The policy was basically.
yeah, so I mean, and I
But we
think that,
do need what was in that email, we do need that overlay so that we know where it's even feasible to put the sidewalk.
and
So,
the engineer has provided the
That's
update.
okay.
And that's
Okay.
there, but and we don't need maybe the joint workshop with the PLDRC on that. That can be separate at an agenda meeting with the council. You know, I know, Debbie had some issue in the sense that the way the ordinance is written, it requires somebody to put in like a 700 foot of sidewalk off on Pennsylvania and in a rural area. And so we're not consistent. We're telling that person, you gotta spend $34,000 on a sidewalk, but we waived it.
well, that's the problem with everything, we're not consistent on anything.
That's right.
So, and I know people get angry at me and they say, he's the guy about the rules. Well,
It's supposed to be
easier
about
to
the
follow
rules. That's right.
that. And that's why I hate things that say to the discretion of, or based on the city administrator. Nothing should be based on my
Right.
opinion. okay? You know, yes, there's day-to-day and things that we do, but not in giving money out and making a decision of who gets this and who doesn't. That should be pretty much black and white and comes to you all. Now, before we leave, and again, just because there's gonna be a timeline, and Roger noted me on it, I did send out, to you all on May 1st, a request that had come from the Volusia County Alumni Chapter of Florida A&M National Alumni Association. They have an event recognizing Mrs. Fowle, and I sent it out with an email and said, if you wanted to discuss this, bring it up under commissioner comments at the night, and nobody did. And so the gentleman called me back today and said, where's the city at? And
Mike Williams.
I expect the city to step up to the plate. Pardon?
I was
Yeah.
gonna talk with, Johnny Chavis about that, cause she's an alumni also with them, and,
That's her.
but she's been dealing with some medical issues and
Yeah, she's
everything.
medical.
But, yeah, we've got a lot of citizens that have come through that, are alumni with that university.
And you,
And it's gonna be a luncheon honoring her, I think it's June 22nd, down at the center of Deltona. And what they're looking for is a sponsorship of, I think what the lowest one, you go down
$1,000.
lower than that, you go down $100, but you don't get no recognition for it. And then I think it's like $75 per person to go to the luncheon or something like that.
65. The lowest sponsorship is bronze for 1,000. You get the,
Down in the center below, it's low.
yeah, that's souvenir booklet advertisement. Full page, 100 half page.
something like that, if we, in lieu of going, but still honoring, respecting, I'll say the Fowler, if the city puts our name out there, put our name out there on a journal that's citywide or countywide, that's basically what a lot of cities do. They don't that $1,000, $5,000. That's for the big donors. That's for the people who got money. That's for the corporations that all these alumni, they come from there and they're in business and they have money. Well, that's good, because the one thing I learned about the alumni associations down here, they're strong. There's the FAMU, there's the Gators, who are you?
My money went to Florida, I didn't.
Very
So I would just say, and I know this gentleman, and it's in them, he is a rabid rattler, as they call it, but sister, or I should say Mrs. Fowler is ours. So we don't do anything else but for ours. She helped build this. She helped nurture this. So at some point, let's look at the smaller picture, maybe not the bigger picture, but the smaller picture is that if we just bought a ticket, 2 tickets or whatever, fill up the table and donate it to some of our citizens that may not have, with no Ms. Fowler. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can do this. I know Mike, like I said, he's a big ticket item. And that's a little bit rich, sorry, financially.
So they're asking for $1,000 minimum plus a $65 luncheon?
No, if 1,000 were donated, you get a table
Yeah.
and the table seat thing.
You get a table of 8.
8 people are being.
And it's $65 a ticket
Right.
without any sponsorship, so 8 times 65, whatever that.
And what is the advertisement for the journal?
If you don't sponsor a table, then it's $55 or $65 per person.
Yeah.
And the cheaper way,
If you donate for the table, then
souvenir journal there, for a full page ad, of course, $200.
$65 per ticket at the has $6,500.
I'm sorry?
520
Oh.
if you
for
buy 8
eight
tickets
people.
instead of
Okay.
sponsoring the table.
Okay.
So we don't have any money left in the line item, but I will gladly put some money toward this
myself,
I will too.
and, maybe get us an app.
Yeah, I think I would go with that as well, and,
Help you cover everything.
Awesome.
okay,
So it sounds like you need $200 to do a full page.
yeah.
You all should never feel a personal pressure or obligation to take money out of your pocket because of getting into an elected position.
Mrs. Fallon was my first grade teacher. I have a problem.
Yeah,
with
it's more than just the
A lot
policy.
of us have personal relationships.
Yeah.
Okay, I know, but I don't, I hate to think that you get elected to serve, and that the expectation is that you have, you're doing a check from
The
the
way I look
office.
at the city pays me as being a commissioner, most of that money is what I donate to different
Right.
things, so.
And this is a small city, this is a small, so we're intimately relations with people that, you think a lot about. And so if it meant that as city commissioners, or again, as city commissioners, people look up to us as the mayor, or city commissioner, vice mayor. When you are at these functions in the affairs, they respect that. And they see the city of Lake Helen. That's the point that I guess I would try to get across, is that what we're doing is representing ourselves outside of the city. We know each other here, but outside the city, I would like to have us show up and show out. I mean, that was the one thing that, went there, for, Barnaby, and, he said, the first thing he said was that, it's about relationships. And this is what we do. It's about building relationships, so.
So what do I tell Mr. Williams?
Was there a deadline for that?
May 31st.
May 31st?
Well, I'll bring you my check tomorrow,
Okay.
when Heather will be able to bring hers.
I'll send you a check for my bill, I don't have checks.
Okay.
But the city will receive my donation.
Well,
So probably when you get that, then there'll probably be sometime next week.
and maybe we can reach out to some of the other individuals in the city who also respect this call for that. The guys that got the big checks, they can write.
The last thing, and it was just a note Kelly gave me, and this can be discussed at budget time. And
No, this one's for this year,
Well,
for this year.
this year meaning,
Meaning I asked previously for an answer on where the money should go for the 5K. And I'm already behind on getting donations because there was no decision on what park we're focusing on.
okay, I thought you were asking 5K for the 24
No.
race.
No, I just need a definite answer on where we're putting the donations this year.
We usually designate what the donations are going to go towards so that they can advertise it on their fundraising thing.
You made a recommendation for it to stay at Melissa Park, correct?
Yeah, but I didn't get an answer.
Okay. Are we allowed to do a consensus of
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize, I was not clear at the last meeting, I'm fine with that. I don't know how y'all feel about it.
What'd you say?
That the money would stay at Melissa Park this year.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because
because there's a lot more improvement
Yeah.
that's still gotta be done here, so I
Okay,
got
thank you. I'm
Okay.
just behind on getting.
sorry that wasn't clear.
Is there anything else that we need to discuss, or?
So we're gonna cancel Tuesday's meeting.
Can we please?
Perfect. I will just, notify folks that, I'm going out of town for, I have a death in family, I'll be leaving on Friday, the 30th. So, no, I won't be able to go to the event. I won't be able to go to the League of Cities dinner, we'll be honoring Rick Mullen. But I did speak to former Mayor Snowden, and he would go in my place.
And adjourn.
Yes, meeting adjourned,
it.
sorry.
For everybody adjourns, don't forget we got our car show on, Monday.
And,
Memorial Day.
and
And we're doing a sermon, and they're still going to fly over.
what time?
I didn't get to say what time.
Well, we're also gonna be at Melissa Park, at the Super Memorial at 7 in the morning, that's just the.
This will be
Be long for that, yeah, that'd be fine. All right.
We never did get home again.
No, Okay.
You can talk.
Give him a call.
Alright.
What do you do with these? Because you don't post them anywhere. What do you save in a minute?
Archive.
That's what I was talking
Yeah, I don't see the way I
You post a couple of them,
No,
right?
he was,
Links are
on the
private.
Barry's.
about. Oh,